Okay, so ready to dive into something kind of heavy?
Yeah, bring it on.
We're going to be tackling the Urantia book,
Always a good time.
specifically paper 118.
Okay.
And this one is a doozy.
Yeah.
It's about deity, time, space,
Yeah.
free will.
Oh, boy. All the big ones.
You know, big topics to tackle.
It's a tall order, even for a paper as dense as this one is.
Right.
But that's what makes it so fun to, dig into.
Exactly. We're gonna unpack all of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to say right up front,
Okay?
this is not your grandma's concept of God.
Unless your grandma was, really into multiversal hierarchies.
Right.
Right.
And in that case, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But, when we say deity, we're not talking about a single God here.
This paper really emphasizes this idea of levels of deity, right?
Yeah.
Instead of one God.
So levels of deity, what does that even mean?
So it's a framework, right?
Yeah.
Where you start out with familiar terms like, God the Father.
Okay.
But then it goes on and it introduces this idea of the supreme, the ultimate, even the absolute.
So instead of God as this, single being, it's more like layers upon layers.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Of existence.
Yeah. And with each level becoming more and more vast and complex.
Okay.
Think about climbing a mountain, right?
Okay.
As you go higher, your perspective changes.
Yeah, okay.
You see more of the landscape. You start to understand the terrain in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
Each level of deity kind of represents a grander, a more expansive view of the entire cosmos.
Okay, so I'm trying to wrap my head around how this changes how we understand God. Because it does seem like on the surface, it makes it way more complicated.
It definitely adds a layer of complexity. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But I think it also gives us a much richer understanding of what we mean when we even say the word God or the divine in general,
Okay.
Because think about it like levels of government, for example, right? You have your local council, then you have your state government, then you have national, all the way up to international bodies.
Right.
Each level has its own area of influence and responsibility.
Right.
But they all work together within this larger system.
Mm-hmm.
And so this paper is suggesting that something similar might be happening with deity.
Okay, so we're not saying that there's all these separate gods, but they're all expressions of the same divine source, different expressions of this one underlying divine reality.
And each one has its own specific role to play.
A role to play in this, grand scheme of things.
Okay.
And actually, this idea of levels, it ties into another really mind-bending concept that this paper tackles. Time.
Yeah, this is where it gets really wild because the Urantia book is saying time, as we experience it, is essentially just our limited human perception of eternity.
It's how we as finite beings perceive this infinite concept of eternity.
Okay.
And it goes even a step further. It proposes that our choices, right? When our choices are aligned with the will of God, they can actually exist outside of time.
Yeah. Imagine your purpose, right? Imagine your life's purpose becoming so fixed, so deeply resonant with the universe itself, that the ticking clock, the passage of time, it becomes almost irrelevant.
Okay, so our day-to-day lives are bound by time, but our purpose, our essence, operates on this completely other level.
This is the kind of mind-blowing idea that this paper is pointing towards, right?
Yeah.
It requires us to think about cause and effect, about past, present, future, in a totally different way.
It's not A to B.
Right.
It's our choices are woven into this much larger tapestry.
That is such a beautiful way to put it.
And the threads are intertwined.
Yes. And this whole thing about time, it connects to another really important distinction the text makes.
Okay.
Between omnipresence and what it calls ubiquity.
I'm going to be honest with you. I thought omnipresence meant God was everywhere.
Right. That's kind of the common understanding.
Yeah.
But the Urantia book is saying God isn't just everywhere that's omnipresence.
Okay.
It's saying that God is present within everything, and that is ubiquity.
Okay.
It's subtle, but it's a really important difference.
Yeah, give me an example because this is getting a little too abstract even for me.
Okay, think about a single ray of sunshine.
Okay.
That single ray contains the energy of the entire sun, right?
Okay.
It's kind of like ubiquity, right? The divine is present even within the smallest, most seemingly insignificant parts of all of creation. The sun itself, that vast source of light and energy, would be more akin to omnipresence.
So God is infinitely vast, but also intimately close at the same time.
And it's this idea of ubiquity, this intimate presence of the divine in all things, that really helps us understand this idea of levels of deity.
Okay, so each level isn't separate,
Right.
but it's a unique expression of this one divine presence.
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept when you really start to think about it.
It is, but it also raises questions about, like, our place in all of this.
Right.
Because if God is in everything, how much free will do we actually have?
That is the question, isn't it?
Right.
Like, do we even have a choice in a universe like that?
It kind of makes you feel like a cog in a giant machine.
Yeah, it's a question that's puzzled theologians and philosophers for centuries.
Right.
And the cool thing is that the Urantia book doesn't shy away from that tension at all. If anything, it leans right into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? If God is in everything,
it really makes you wonder,
how much free will do we really have?
Exactly. How much agency do we actually have?
Right.
And the interesting thing is the Urantia book kind of takes this really nuanced approach, right?
Okay.
It's saying that, yes, we do have genuine freedom of choice.
Okay.
But it's not unlimited.
It's not just a free-for-all.
No, not exactly. It's not a free-for-all.
Okay.
It uses this analogy of a sculptor working with a block of marble.
Okay.
The sculptor has the freedom to shape that marble, right?
Yeah.
To bring forth something beautiful.
Right.
But the sculptor can't turn that marble into something it's not.
Right.
They have to work within the limitations of the material itself.
So we're not puppets.
Right.
But we're also not all-powerful.
Yeah, we're not omnipotent beings, right?
Right.
We do have more agency than we might think, but it's important to recognize that our choices have consequences.
Okay.
And those consequences ripple outwards.
Okay, so everything's interconnected. Our choices have these ripple effects.
Yeah.
But does that mean we're not responsible for the outcomes?
That's where it gets even more interesting.
Because it seems like it would be easy to just say,
sure,
well, it was all part of the plan anyway.
Right, like it was meant to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's where the Urantia book really emphasizes this idea of personal responsibility.
Okay.
It suggests that our choices matter not because they're changing some predetermined outcome.
Okay.
But because they reflect who we are at our core. They reveal our alignment or our misalignment with this larger purpose, with this will of God that we were talking about earlier.
So it's less about trying to control the universe with our decisions and more about understanding that our choices are a reflection of something deeper.
They're a reflection of our inner state.
Okay.
And that's where this idea of spiritual growth becomes so central to the text's message.
So let's talk about spiritual growth.
Okay.
Because I think it's a term that gets thrown around a lot.
It definitely does.
But what does it actually mean in the context of the Urantia book?
So in the context of the Urantia book, spiritual growth is all about progressively aligning our will with the will of God.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about time perception expanding as we mature?
Yes.
This paper is suggesting that something similar happens with our spiritual understanding, right?
Oh.
As we grow spiritually, our time unit, so to speak, it expands as well.
So we start to see the bigger picture.
Exactly. We start to see the bigger picture. We start to see beyond just the immediate gratification of our desires. And we start making choices that are more aligned with that larger purpose.
So we're playing the long game, even if we can't see the finish line.
Precisely. It's about playing the long game even when we can't see the finish line.
Okay.
And as we become more conscious of that larger purpose, as we strive to make choices that are not just self-serving, but also life-giving, love-affirming, truth-seeking, that's when we start to really align ourselves with the will of God as this text describes it.
That makes sense, but how do we actually do that? How does that play out in our daily lives?
Right.
It still feels kind of abstract. It's easy to say, make choices for the greater good.
Right.
But, like, life is messy.
Exactly.
So what does that actually look like?
It's not about, like, flipping a switch and suddenly becoming, morally perfect.
Yeah.
The Urantia book really emphasizes that spiritual growth is a process.
Okay.
Like any journey, it happens one step at a time.
So baby steps.
A baby step.
What would be a good first step in aligning our will like that?
Well, it's interesting because the text highlights something that's actually pretty simple.
Okay.
And that is expanding our sphere of care. So starting to become more conscious of the impact of our choices, not just on ourselves, but on the people around us.
So shifting from like a me-centered to a we-centered perspective.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're not these isolated individuals.
Right.
We're part of this web of relationships, families, communities, the planet itself.
Right.
And as our awareness of that interconnectedness grows, so too does our sense of responsibility.
Kind of like those ripples we were talking about.
Exactly. Our actions have impact.
A lasting impact, even in small ways.
So as we become more attuned to those ripples, we naturally start making different choices.
Right. And we start asking ourselves, like, what kind of impact do I want to have on the world around me?
So bringing that awareness into our everyday decision-making.
Exactly. Exactly. And as we do that, the Urantia book suggests that something really remarkable happens.
Okay.
We start to tap into a different kind of power.
A power that's not about, dominance or control, but about creativity, compassion, connection.
So less about conquering the world, more about just contributing to it.
Exactly. Remember that feeling of being a cog in a machine?
Yeah.
This is where things start to shift, right? We begin to see ourselves less as cogs and more as active participants in this, this grand cosmic dance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that, a cosmic dance.
Right.
But how does this all connect back to providence?
Okay.
Because if we're actively shaping our choices, where does the predetermined plan come in?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the Urantia book suggests that providence isn't about this fixed path that's already laid out for us, but rather it's about a framework of possibilities within which we have the freedom to choose.
Okay, so it's not so much a script.
Right.
As it's like a creative collaboration.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Okay.
It's this idea that there is this benevolent force, this cosmic artistry that's guiding us and supporting us. But our task is to stay open to that guidance.
Okay.
To keep making choices that are aligned with our highest understanding of truth, beauty, goodness, all of those things.
We're invited to be co-creators.
Absolutely.
That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It's a pretty empowering way to think about our place in the universe, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Instead of just being
passive recipients of fate.
Yeah. Just along for the ride.
Just along for the ride.
But we actually get to have a say in how things unfold.
Exactly.
I like that.
I think that's a message we can all get behind.
I think so too. And on that note, I think that's going to do it for this deep dive into the Urantia book, at least this part of it.
There's always more to explore, right?
Always more to explore, but we're going to leave you with this final thought from the Urantia book. Something to kind of ponder.
I like it.
As you continue on your own journey, the greatest adventure in life is the discovery of your divine purpose.
Love it.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring all those infinite possibilities that are within you and all around you.
Beautifully said.
All right. See you next time.
See you later.